This is a story from my childhood at my grandfather's house in the countryside. My grandfather lived in the lush, natural surroundings of a rural area in the Northeast, where many eerie tales about monsters and legends circulated. I was in 3rd grade at the time and really believed that monsters existed. Once, I heard a warning from my grandfather. He told me never to go to the dark, deep part of the river, because I would be dragged in by a kappa. Since I was quite timid, after hearing what he said, I only ever played in the shallow areas near the riverbank. One day, I was alone by the river picking up stones when I suddenly heard splashing water sounds coming from the river. I instinctively turned my head and looked. In the deep water far out in the middle of the river, I saw what looked like an arm reaching out and waving at me. Startled and without thinking, I shouted, "It's a kappa." Remembering my grandfather's warning and terrified of being pulled into the river, I hurled the stones in my hand as hard as I could. I kept throwing several of them, and one particularly large stone struck the water right near where the arm had appeared. The moment it hit, I heard a groan coming from that direction in the water. Then the entire river surface returned to its previous calm. I thought to myself, "Great, the kappa is gone." I drove it away. Relieved, I headed home. When I got back, I saw my grandparents, father and mother, all running around with tense, pale faces. I asked what was wrong. My father told me that the old lady next door had gone out to pick wild vegetables but hadn't come back, and they didn't know if something had happened to her. After that, my parents and grandparents went out to search for the neighbor. The next day, I heard that the old lady from next door had drowned. Her body was found in the river and recovered that day. In the evening, my parents said the examiners believed she had probably fallen from the slope above and dropped into the river, where she drowned. They had found that her forehead seemed to have struck a large stone. Her head was split open, as if it had been smashed by the rock. My family lived near a beach, and it was mid-June. I could have spent the summer by the sea, but I suddenly felt like going to the river to play. Although there was a river nearby, I didn't want to go there. For some reason, the river I wanted to visit was close by. I thought about what I could do by the river, maybe fishing, but I didn't have any fishing gear, so I came up with the wild idea of having a barbecue by the river instead. I thought it would be perfect and a wonderful experience, so I decided on it. I started calling a few friends and ended up inviting 3, all guys. After getting people together, I began looking into which riverbank would be good for a barbecue. While I was still searching, a girl named Keiko suddenly called. She said she had heard from a friend that we were going for a barbecue and wanted to join. I thought it was a bit unusual for a girl I didn't know to want to come with us, but I agreed anyway. She said she knew a nice river, so I let her choose the location. A little later, she sent me an email with the barbecue spot. Once the place and time were set, we all waited for the day to arrive. On the day of the barbecue, I told them one more person was coming, but after waiting nearly an hour, Keiko still hadn't appeared. Since we knew where the spot she recommended was, we decided not to contact her and just headed out. When we arrived, the scenery was incredible. The riverbank was covered in beautiful stones, and across the water stood a mountain. The view was outstanding. I felt that deciding to come to the river for a barbecue had been a great choice. We climbed down to the riverbed, started grilling, and began drinking. While we were enjoying ourselves, I heard the sound of bicycle brakes. Then a middle-aged man appeared nearby and harshly scolded us. "What are you guys doing here?" Because we had been drinking and were suddenly doused with cold water, my friends, now irritated, didn't respond very politely. I was the more honest one, so I tried to calm everyone down. At that point the man said, "When the water rises upstream, the river level shoots up quickly. You all should take a good look at your feet." Then he kicked a nearby stone hard with his foot, and I saw water pooled underneath it. The man continued, "It's raining heavily upstream right now, so hurry up and leave unless you want to die here." Not wanting to die, I immediately persuaded my friends to pack everything up and move to higher ground on the riverbank. Afterward, we returned to the parking area. While I was checking the things we had brought, the man walked over carrying a bottle of shaku. He said he had been really worried about us earlier because the situation was urgent. So he had raised his voice, and he felt bad about it. Once we understood the situation, we made peace with him and started chatting while drinking. As we were talking pleasantly, the man looked down toward the riverbank and sighed, "If only Keiko had friends like you." I was a bit confused and asked what he meant. The man sighed and said, "Keiko is my niece. Last year, she was here having a barbecue with her friends when the river water swept her away. Someone passing by had warned them, but she and her friends didn't listen. They didn't come up, and they were all washed away by the current." Hearing this, I was stunned, and my heart tightened. They didn't come up, and they were all washed away by the current. Hearing this, I was stunned, and my heart tightened. I kept thinking about the name Kako. It had to be nothing more than a coincidence, right? But I was so bothered by it that I secretly checked my phone records. I discovered that on the day we decided where to have the barbecue, I had only received any mail from that stranger who called herself Kako. There wasn't a single missed call or incoming call record from that day. The whole thing felt utterly unreal. Even now, I still have no idea how that phone call I answered actually happened. And I don't understand why Kako wanted to lead us to the very river where she herself had been swept away. This is a strange experience I had once while fishing alone in a remote mountain river. The story is short, but remembering it still sends chills down my spine. That day, I drove alone into the mountains to fish by myself in a deep, secluded stretch of river. Being alone in the mountains can feel a little eerie and lonely, but it's also wonderful in its own way. After catching a few fish, I felt like I was in good form. I cast my line again and stared intently at the float as it drifted left with the current. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a human figure not far to the left. I turned my head and saw a woman in a dress with long black hair standing right in the middle of the river. The water came up to about her thighs, and she was facing away from me, so I couldn't see her face. I had no memory of when she had appeared there. I thought to myself, the current is so strong in that spot that even I can barely stand. So how is such a slender woman staying upright? It was strange. I stared at her motionless, eerie back, and all kinds of terrifying thoughts flooded my mind. What if she suddenly turns around and her face is completely rotted away? Fear crept over me, and I decided to leave quickly. As I packed up my fishing rod and prepared to go, I glanced back one more time. The woman was still standing in the rushing water with her back to me in exactly the same position. Too scared to look again, I ran off without turning my head. Later, I told a fishing buddy about what I had seen. He said that for a long time, people had often spotted a woman standing in that river. The descriptions varied slightly. Some saw her in a dress, others in a kimono, but everyone agreed she was always facing away, her face hidden, standing motionless in the middle of the fast current. Those who had seen her found it deeply unsettling and repulsive. No one dared speak to her, and no one had ever seen her face. After hearing all this, I felt terrified, yet I couldn't help wondering what she would look like if she turned around. Just as that thought crossed my mind, my friend added casually, "Maybe it's not that no one has seen her face. Maybe everyone who has seen it never made it back safely." This happened when I was in elementary school. Back then, a few of us classmates often played by the river. We would climb over the fence along the embankment and head down to the shallow gravel beds. We found all sorts of things floating in the river, stuff that had drifted down from upstream, like tires and industrial waste that people had probably dumped illegally. Besides the trash, we also frequently came across the bodies of cats, dogs, and fish that had already begun to bloat and decompose. Although the river looked filthy, discovering things you wouldn't normally see gave the place a real sense of adventure, and it was actually pretty fun. One day, we went to the river again. Suddenly, one of the kids spotted something strange, a square, mud-iron block about the size of a basketball. It looked solid. We stood at a distance, staring at the odd object and discussing what it could be and why it was sitting there on the shallow bank. The closer we got, the clearer it became. Its surface was pitch black and filthy, with what looked like traces of welding seams that had been sealed afterward. I found it strange, so I walked even closer to examine it carefully. As I approached, a stench unlike anything from this world hit me, an indescribable odor that nearly made me vomit. Still, we were mischievous kids. We pinched our noses, kicked the iron block with our feet, poked it with sticks, and kept messing around with it. After doing this for a while, we all suddenly froze. Our eyes were drawn to a huge, mysterious animal carcass floating on the river. It drifted slowly toward us, and when it came closer, we saw that it was the body of a pig. Looking at the dead pig's body, terribly bloated with gases, everyone was instantly left speechless, as if we had seen an alien. Usually, it was likely livestock. That iron block had drifted down from the northern Kanto region. A few of us picked up sticks and branches from the roadside and prodded the dead pig's swollen belly. With every poke, a foul, rotting stench hit our noses. After breathing it in a few times, I suddenly realized how similar the smell was to the one coming from that iron block. A terrible thought crept into my mind. It couldn't be. That iron block was solid after all. There had to be something inside it. And whatever was packed in there, if it was animal remains, no one would bother sealing them inside an iron block and welding it shut. The idea felt terrifying, deeply wrong. When I shared my suspicion with the others, my classmates went pale and fell completely silent. The few of us just stood at a distance, staring wordlessly at the iron block that now seemed to reek of the same stench. If we could see Oris like in a comic book, that thing would have been radiating a pitch-black one right then. None of us said another word. We stood there frozen in fear for a while, then quickly scattered, each of us rushing back home as fast as we could. After that day, until we were all grown up, none of us ever dared go play near that spot again. Even now, when we get together for drinks and the conversation turns nostalgic, someone always brings up that mysterious iron block. We still don't know what was sealed inside it, and none of us wants to find out, because judging by the smell that leaked out, it was clear the truth had to be something horribly gruesome. The story my friend heard came from a writer at a fishing magazine. It took place on a tributary of the Ichino's River, just past Okayutama along the Oemi Highway, not far before the infamous haunted spot known as Oiran-Buchi, where two rivers meet. That stretch is called the Ichino's River. One section runs through a narrow valley hemmed in by sheer cliffs on both sides. Mr. Kamitani was an avid mountain stream fisherman. He always said the best catches came from places most people couldn't reach. That day, he waded into the river from the confluence and began casting, but after some time there wasn't a single bite. Disappointed, he decided to move on. When he tried to climb out, he realized the rock walls rose straight up on either side with no easy exit. Reluctantly, he started wading upstream through the current. Halfway along, fish suddenly appeared, good ones, too. Encouraged, he kept going, following the Ichino's River deeper into the valley. Before long he was in his element, landing fish steadily. Along the way he came to a 3-meter waterfall and pulled out the biggest catch of the day there. Thrilled, he decided to push on toward an even larger waterfall he could see upstream. When he reached the pool below it, he was startled to find someone already fishing just ahead of him. The stranger was casting with a long bamboo rod, and one glance told Kamitani this was a real expert. Yet the man's appearance was utterly bizarre. He wore a formal suit, polished leather shoes, and a flat cap. The outfit looked completely out of place in the remote mountain stream. Still, his skill was undeniable. Fish after fish came flying out of the water on his line. Normally, when mountain and mine stream anglers meet, they exchange a quick greeting, or at least a nod of respect. But something about this man made Kamitani hesitate. The air felt heavier, and an uneasy chill crept up his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The man in the suit never moved from his spot the entire time. While anyone stream fishing would normally work their way slowly upstream to new pools, Mr. Kamitani wanted to keep heading farther up, but mountain stream fishing has its own unwritten rules. It's considered rude for a latecomer to push past someone who arrived first. The polite thing is to greet them first and ask if they mind letting you pass upstream, even though the man struck him as deeply odd, and that oddness stirred real fear in his chest. Mr. Kamitani had no choice if he wanted to continue. He walked closer and called out politely, "Hello there. That was a beautiful fish you just caught." The man in the suit stayed squatting with his back turned, apparently working the hook free. Mr. Kami tried again. That one must have been a full foot long. Still no answer. The man didn't even turn his head. Wondering if the stranger might be hard of hearing, Mr. Kamitani stepped around to the right to get a better look, but the man quickly twisted his face away, refusing to let him see. Strange as it was, Mr. Kamitani finally saw what the man was doing down there on the ground. He was forcing the freshly caught fish into a glass specimen jar, pushing hard. Desperately, it was just one or two fish. The jar was already crammed full, the bodies crushed and deformed, squeezed into a single shapeless mass of bloody mush. The sight sent a cold jolt through him. This guy clearly washed right in the head. Best to stay clear. Mr. Kamitani muttered a quick "excuse me" and turned to leave. Mr. Kamitani quickly said, "Excuse me," and walked past the man. The suited figure matched his movement, turning his back to him so his face remained completely hidden. All the while, he kept violently stuffing fish into the jar. Mr. Kamitani continued forward for about 10 meters, then glanced back. The man had vanished. He scanned the riverbank's steep rock walls nearly 10 meters high, with a waterfall just downstream. There was nowhere for anyone to climb out easily. He had no idea how the man in the suit could have disappeared so suddenly, and a deep fear gripped him. For a moment he even wondered if it had all been a hallucination. Sometime later, at a drinking party with his fishing buddies, Mr. Tani met a legendary figure known as the Master of Okayutama. This gentleman had explored every small tributary and swamp in the area and had even written a serialized column about his experiences in a fishing magazine. During their conversation, Mr. Tani casually mentioned his strange encounter with the man in the suit. After listening quietly, the old expert looked at him and said softly, "So, Mr. Tani," from the gentleman's reaction, it was clear that what Mr. Tani had seen that day was no hallucination. Though they never learned exactly what the suited man was, one thing was certain: he was no ordinary person. He was something terrifying that belonged only to those remote waters. So if you ever go fishing there and happen to come across the man in the suit, be careful. Don't let curiosity draw you near. If you see him, just pretend you never did. That would be for the best. Years later, whenever I returned to the village, I would still unconsciously glance toward that old locust tree at the entrance. The tree was still there, its branches even thicker and more twisted, as if it had absorbed all the secrets of that summer. But the man in the suit never appeared again. Sometimes, late at night, I would think of my little brother. In my dreams, he would still be running ahead of me on the dirt path, laughing and shouting for me to catch up. Then he would suddenly stop, turn around, and look at me with those innocent eyes, asking softly, "Brother, why didn't you come find me?" I never had an answer. Perhaps some truths are better left buried in the soil of that remote mountain village, never to be dug up again. If one day you happen to pass by a quiet, old heathen village and see a child in red standing alone under an old locust tree, waving at you with a sweet smile, or if you come across the man in the suit, be careful. Don't let curiosity draw you near. If you see him, just pretend you never did. That would be for the best.